Hey, it's Yay for Yarn, and today I'm going to show you a mistake that you definitely want to avoid when making your own polymer clay crochet hooks. So if you've been watching my channel for a while now, then you've probably seen my homemade polymer clay crochet hook video. And I used the Clover Amour hooks that I already had, and I removed the rubber handles so that I could add a super chunky furls style and shape handle to my existing hooks, because realistically, as much as I love my furls hooks, especially the Odyssey, I really don't want to pay $30-some per hook to have one of those in every size. So I have a couple of them, and that's good, but I'm not gonna, for as much as they cost, I'm not going to get every single size in that hook. So what I did was I removed the rubber handles from the Clover hooks that I already had, and I baked on a new handle made out of polymer clay. So if you want more information on how I did this, then I do have the original video linked in the description box. But today I'm going to show you the one thing that you don't want to do, which I unfortunately learned the hard way, when making your own crochet hooks with polymer clay. And that mainly has to do with how you choose and use your materials. And so what happened was I finished my hooks by giving them a coating of this triple thick gloss glaze. And it looked very nice, very glossy and smooth. And I thought it looked great. And I chose this gloss glaze because this was listed as like an all-purpose glaze that could be applied to lots of different surfaces. It doesn't really say anything about it on the bottle other than that you can, put on one coat and it adds depth because it's extra thick and blah, blah, blah. Dry for 24 hours. Okay. So I assumed this was all-purpose in the sense that it could be used on something like polymer clay. But evidently, not all gloss glazes are compatible with polymer clay. So I'm not going to throw this out. I will probably use it for something else because it does make a really nice glossy finish, but this did not work for what I needed. The problem was, once the glaze was on there, even though it was fully dry, it never felt dry. It always felt kind of sticky. And so if I put the hooks together in a cup or a jar, then they would stick to each other. And then when you pull them apart, then they would peel chunks of glaze off of the other side of whichever other hook they were up against. And so it was getting kind of sloppy looking because there were chunks missing out of the glaze. And I didn't really know what to do about it because it had already dried plenty. And it just, even later, for a long time later, it never stopped being sticky. So I decided to try a different glaze, and this is the Fimo Gloss Varnish. And I'll talk about this more in a minute, but I really liked this one. So what I did was, it was suggested to me by somebody who makes these to sell for Etsy, that I could strip off the old glaze with rubbing alcohol. So I tried several different methods, but what I found worked best for me was to put each hook in a small Ziploc bag and just put a couple tablespoons of rubbing alcohol in it. And I had 2 bags, and I rotated them out of the bags, switched them, for the different hooks. But what I would do is I left them in the rubbing alcohol for about 10 minutes, and then I would turn it over so that the other side was submerged. But the hook really didn't go under the alcohol very much. So once the existing glaze, the original glaze, was very white and goopy looking on the surface of this, then I would take it out of the bag, hold the end of it with a paper towel, and try to wipe off as much as I could with a paper towel. The problem was, when this stuff gets softened to remove it, it's super, super sticky, like melted marshmallow type of consistency. and it was really hard to get it off because it would just stick to everything, especially the paper towel, and that made it hard to wipe it off. So once I got off as much as I could with the paper towel, then I took a toothbrush. Obviously, after you do this, you don't want to use the toothbrush again in your mouth, but I used an old toothbrush that had been washed and cleaned, and I used some oil to scrub the extra goop off of each hook. And the toothbrush really helped to get into these little crevices, because sometimes the little globs of the glaze as it was coming off would get stuck in the crevices and in the detailing of the hook. So I found that the oil was pretty necessary to get off the original glaze, but according to the jar on my new glaze, it says that the surface has to be totally free of oil or grease. So what I did was, after I used the oil to wipe off the glaze with the toothbrush, I rinsed them off, dried them, and I kind of let them dry for a little while. And then I came back and gently washed them with some soap and water to get off any excess oil that might still be there on the surface. And then once I washed them to get the oil off and let them dry again, then I poked them into my styrofoam like I did the first time, and applied 2 coats of this glaze, the gloss varnish. And this stuff is very runny. It's very, it's like kind of milky. It looks like you're just painting milk onto the surface of your hooks. Whereas this stuff is like really thick and, you know, like more of a honey consistency as far as how fast it pours. And obviously you don't want to pour this stuff on your hooks. You want to use a paintbrush. But this stuff is very liquidy, and I did a coat, let it dry, did another coat, and I think it came out very well. The surface of the hooks is now shiny glossy, but it's not sticky. It's very, dry. It feels dry to the touch, which is what it's supposed to do. And I have done a little bit of, testing with them, using them for crochet, and they feel very nice in the hand now without any of that sticky goop on the surface. So one more thing I do want to mention is that this hook down here had a little crack in it, just like a real thin crack in this little section right here. So what I did was I took my paintbrush and I used a little bit of this bacon bond that I used to, glue the clay to the hook and glue the parts of the clay together. And so I took the paintbrush and I put a little bit of bacon bond on the crack, smoothed it out so there wasn't any extra, drippage or goop just, sitting around in a puddle on the hook. And then I baked it again, and that sealed the crack, and it looks almost invisible now. And another thing that I had to do was, I don't know why, but for whatever reason, the orange one and the light green one lost pretty much all of their glitter when I took the glaze off, even though I did it the same way that I did all the rest of them. All the rest of these had the glaze pressed into the surface of the clay, and even though the surface isn't like totally perfectly smooth, as far as, you can feel a little bit of texture from the glitter, that was, I was kind of planning on that, because if you don't want to feel the texture of the glitter just a little bit anyway, then you're just going to not put glitter on it, because you will be able to feel it just a little bit. But it's still not like scratchy or anything. So it's relatively smooth. Whereas the orange and the light green lost all their glitter. So I knew by this time, that because I had already done it to some of the rest of the hooks, that I could not use this to adhere the glitter to the clay. Because all of these were already baked. They were already finished as far as the clay part, baked, and, they had already been completely done, except that this gloss glaze had to be removed because it wasn't working. So what I did was I took my paintbrush again with the bacon bond, and I did a real thin coat of bacon bond on the surface of the clay, sprinkled my glitter, and baked it on. And if you remember the instructions that I gave in the original video on how I made the hooks, I bake polymer clay at a very, very, very low temperature. So then that way it will not, there's not really any chance of it burning or scorching. So I bake them very low for a longer period of time, and that helps to make sure that they're baked all the way through the center and that they're not burnt, because that can happen when you're working with polymer clay, especially if you bake them at the temperature given on the package. So I baked it at a very low temperature with the bacon bond and the glitter on it. Now you do want to keep in mind, if you have to do this, or if you want to add glitter to a hook after the fact, that you only want to put the bacon bond on one half of the handle, put the glitter on, bake it, then take it back out, turn it over, and do the other half with the bacon bond and the glitter, because when you bake this, you lay it on top of the cotton batting, like I mentioned in my first video, and you don't want that batting fuzz to stick in your glue. So you just want the glitter to stick in there. So that's why we do only one half with the glitter, bake it, and then do the other half, turn it over, and then bake it again. So on these two where I had to add the glitter back in and there wasn't any pressed into the clay, I must have forgot to press it in when I originally made these two hooks. But there is a bit more of a texture to the handle. You can feel a little bit more surface texture from that glitter, but again, it's not anything scratchy or annoying because I use an extra fine glitter, which is super tiny. You know, the glitter pieces are very, very, very small. So that is what happened in my situation with these hooks when I made them the first time. And that is why I haven't, used these a whole lot in my videos, is because they were sticky and I didn't really like that feeling when I was crocheting. So I've kind of avoided using these for a while I figured out what I was going to do about it. But now they are all totally dry feeling. They don't feel sticky at all. I would say if you're going to use a glaze on your hooks, use this one. It does cost more for the amount that you get by quite a bit. I think it was like 10 or 11 bucks for this bottle, and this is like 1.18 fluid ounces. So this is a very small jar, and it is kind of expensive, but you only use a very small amount. I barely even touched the amount of glaze that was originally in here when I started out glazing all of these hooks. So this will probably last me a long time. I will probably never need to buy another jar of this, but if you want to add a shiny glaze to your hooks, use this one, because this one is made for polymer clay, and as long as you follow the directions, then you'll know that it will stay on there. It will not be sticky. And it just says that it's water-based. You paint it on, touch dry after 20 minutes, fully dry after 24 hours. So as long as your surface is dry, clean, and free of grease and fat, then you can go ahead and use this just as I did the other one. It's just a much better product for polymer clay. So now that my hooks are finished for real this time and have a nice coating on them that does not peel off, now I can use them in all my projects and not have to worry about any glitter flaking or any stickiness to the handles. So if you want to make your own polymer clay crochet hook handles, go ahead and click the link in the description box for my original tutorial. This project was way cheaper than buying a whole set of thick-handled crochet hooks because we make the handles ourselves. And if you have coupons and stuff at the craft store wherever you buy the supplies, then this can be made even cheaper than what it was for me if you made them like all the same color or not have a different color for every single one of them. I just chose to color code them the same way that they were originally before I took the rubber handles off. So this was, I think it was about $4 total per hook. It might be $4 and some odd cents per hook, or closer to $5 by the time you account the cost of this glaze. But it was still very inexpensive to change the hooks over to this new super thick handle style, as far as in comparison to buying a whole set of the very thick ergonomic hooks. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know what kinds of surface coatings you have used on your polymer clay in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, making sure you click the little bell next to the subscribe button to be notified of new videos. Thanks for watching.